Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast series with Bridget Johnson. Each month, we bring you game-changing conversations about K-12 education and leadership. Join us as top educators, field experts, and administrators share actionable strategies to transform your school community. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast. I'm Bridget Johnson, the founder of the Dean's Roundtable, a space created for student life professionals to connect, learn, share, and grow together. I can't tell you how excited I am today to welcome David Torcoletti to our podcast today. David has worn many hats throughout his incredible career in education. He started teaching at Amherst College before becoming a campus dean at Northfield Mount Hermon, where he oversaw hundreds of students and faculty. Later, he joined Milton Academy as dean of students, which is actually where our paths crossed, where he became my mentor. Until recently, David led Explod's junior program, working with younger students in grades 4 through 7. He also helped countless schools improve their student life programs and coached many administrators like myself. When he's not shaping education, David's an amazing photographer with gallery exhibits and even a Massachusetts Arts Council grant under his belt. And I hear he's recently upgraded his digital drum set to a full jazz kit and is taking weekly lessons. I am thrilled to have my mentor joining us today on the Dean's Roundtable podcast to talk about, mentorship. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So tell us about your journey. How'd you get into the whole world of education?
I always knew I wanted to be a photographer. And I always knew I did. I was 12 years old and I wrote down, I was graduating from junior high school as they had back then. And it said something like, what do you want to be when you grow up? One of those
Okay.
in my yearbook. And in my yearbook, I wrote down, I want to teach photography to high school kids. And I'm 12.
Oh, wow.
So I
Wow.
kind of do it. And so one of the things that that was important to me was that I was going to practice this art after getting my degrees and doing the things that I do. I had no idea where I was going to practice it. And so one of the avenues was to do the college world, as many of my colleagues and friends had done. And I was kind of getting ready to step into that world. I needed a gig because I needed to pay my rent. And there was a teaching job at Northfield Mount Hermon School. And so I applied, I got that job, and it was lovely. I was part-time. It was like a grandfather, even though I was 25. I would teach my class. I would leave them to the wonderful, residential life faculty, and then I would come back the next day and do it again. And then somebody offered me a job that meant living in a dormitory, and I thought they were kidding. I did. I was going to live at my high school. I had never heard of such a ridiculous thing. And so, but I also got the idea that they would pay my rent or there'd be no rent or things like, so I said yes. And then after that, that's what it was. I'm living on a floor with 25 boys in North Crosley Dormitory, and I'm sitting there with them, and they are living their lives, and their lives are so full and thick, and they're just trying to figure out life. And I'm there, and they're knocking on my door and asking me to sit and figure out life too. And that's kind of what hooked me. I mean, I love teaching my classes. I coached hockey. I did the whole thing that people do when you're living in that situation. But I also just had that stream of boys coming into my life and letting me be part of theirs. And that got me hooked. And sometime after that, I ran my own dormitory. Instead of living on the floor, I became the dorm head. And then sometime after that, I became the dean of students for one of the campuses, and so on and so forth. When there was another phase that my school was in where they decided that instead of having the classic separation of dean and students and academic dean, they would meld them into one thing they called the school dean. And so I did that job, which means I was visiting all my teachers during the day. I would be working with my kids at night. It was a very full job, and wonderful. I was watching wonderful teachers teach. I was observing them. I was meeting with them and talking about what they had done. I was learning a lot because many of them were teachers I could hold in wonder, and that was glorious. And then my life shifted a little bit. I wanted to go try something else in some other place, so I became the dean at another school in the Boston area at Milton. And so that's where
Yeah, that is where I know. And so was there a moment where you were like, Oh yeah, this dean thing. I think that I want to go that route, or did it just kind of evolve? Like, how'd you get to that piece? Because I feel like that's from photography and living in the dorm and coaching hockey. That's a leap, and that's a little bit of a leap. In some ways, the same leap that I took. So I'm
Right.
curious to hear.
Well, I think that for for me, particularly as a young person, when I was a living in the dormitory as a faculty member, I watched the dorm head do their work. I
Mm.
appreciated that their work was really hard, and I also thought like, oh, I might do that differently, or I might do that better, or I could. And so, part of it is that it's so, because the spirits listen, and then they punish you if your ego gets the next thing you know, I'm running a dormitory, and then there's somebody second guessing me, I'm sure. And then when I'm doing that, I'm looking at the dean and thinking like, oh, hard job. Like I appreciate how hard this is, but I wish you would do it this way. Like again, and then the same punishment occurred. It's like the dean's job came up, and I was so interested in, and partially it's because I love the stream of kids walking into my dormitory when I was living in a dormitory. I thought that was great, but
Yeah.
also couldn't affect things like policy. I couldn't affect the atmosphere of the campus as much. I couldn't affect the agreement that we all live under, the handbook and various other kinds of things, from being in that position. And I wanted to. Like, I had ideas about how I thought we should live together, and to express
Mm.
those ideas and realize them, I needed to be able to be the dean, something higher up that had
Okay.
influence. And so that's part of what got me into it.
Okay, fair enough. And so, do you feel like your background in the arts influenced your approach and working with students and faculty as a dean?
Ooh, that's a good question. That I think it did, because I think part of it is that in the arts, when you're an artist and you're pursuing that thing, the weight is on the question rather than on the answer. The answer is a process. You keep going through it. You make pieces, but you have to have questions in order to generate that. And I think the
Yeah.
idea that I considered living with these kids, adolescents in my case, because it was a high school, and that they were filled with their own questions about how life would be. And I was having questions like, if a community was going to be really healthy, how is it that we should live together? And then from
Mm.
that, sort of construct or influence at least policy that would sort of be the answer to that question. So yes, I think the question asking part is part and parcel of being an artist, and it probably
Mhm.
didn't my deeming.
Okay. And so, do you feel like your philosophy of student support evolved over time, or are you kind of still the same way you were when you kind of first started as a dean?
I think I think I'm mostly the way I am, that I am. I mean, I am what I am, and so
Yeah,
I
right.
express myself in my art or in my academic and administrative work, and out of who I am, which is why I think it's so important that people learn who they are, because that's how you're doing the work. You're doing it out of
Right.
your own spirit and your own nature. So my nature stayed the same, but I think part of what happened over decades was that I kind of realized that people we're all so flawed together, and my sense of humor about how it is that, oh god, we blew it again, or that kid did it again, or she's really going to struggle with that, or something like that, just made me, my perspective got longer and better, and
Mm.
I think I held my tongue more. I think I part of me, which is a natural part of me, I could put it aside more. No one would argue it's gone, but at least I could rest it a little bit more. So I think perspective changed. A thing that I kept teaching in my later years that I wish I taught in my early years
Mm.
is, when I would talk to the deans who worked for me at Explo or other places, they would tell me what happened, and I'd say, "You don't have the story. You don't know the story yet.
Don't
No,
know the
the
story.
story. I've got so many questions to ask. Don't even think you have the story." And at the beginning, I liked quick stories. Like I liked,
Oh, we all like a quick story. I got it. I'm going to
yeah,
run with this. Yeah.
I never had it. And so what I learned over time was to take a breath and realize that it's probably more complicated than what's being presented to you, and people haven't asked the right questions yet, including me, and we need to figure that out together. So I
Get
think
the
that,
full story.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the things I remember most about our time together. And I'm just going to give people a little bit of a background. I arrived at Milton. I had not been in a leadership role prior to stepping on campus as a dean of students. I had spent, though, a good amount of time living on boarding school campus as an admissions officer, as a coach. I was a part of the student assistance team with help with drugs and alcohol. And I was doing things on campus that would kind of lend me to kind of the deaning role, but I had not been a dean. And so it's a daunting task stepping on this campus of 700 students, a school I don't know, a school that doesn't know me. And so it was so wonderful to have David come and meet with me on a regular basis to just kind of talk through what was happening and how I was going to manage and what my philosophy was going to be, what my values are, what did I stand for, and there are a couple of things that you told me. One, I'll get the full story, which I totally remember and I say all the time to people. But the other thing is trusting your gut. And that was something that I really had to kind of make sure that I was doing in those moments and not kind of second guess myself. And sometimes we can when we get in these positions, when you are new to the role and you feel like, oh, well, I don't, everyone else probably knows better than me. And so kind of leaning on that, or just that can also lead to paralysis as well, not making any decision. But our conversations were so helpful, which is the reason why I do this work now, is the reason why I started the roundtable, because I know the importance of having a mentor, having someone to kind of debrief and bounce ideas off of that's not necessarily at your school. Because sometimes you just need to say some things or get some stuff off your chest that you don't want to say to your colleague or to your boss. And so being able to have David as a listening ear, as someone who was kind of a guiding light for me during the time where I just wasn't sure where I was going, to be very honest, it was so new for me. It's so, I so appreciate it. I look back on it with such fond memories because you helped me to kind of gain my voice as a dean and to shape me as to who I am. So, with all of that said, I just want to say thank you, David, for all of that, because
It
it
was
was
lovely to
so
meet you.
amazing. But when did you first find yourself in mentoring roles, and was that something you consciously pursued, or did it kind of emerge naturally?
I think part of it is that, again, thinking about our natures, I think my nature is to teach, and to but my and again, that whole question asking thing is very built into me. So even as I was doing my jobs on the floor in a classroom or running a dormitory, I kept finding that when I would speak to my faculty member who completely messed up this thing with this kid on a floor, and we would try and do the post game locker room talk afterwards, like what happened, like what. I learned that rather than telling them what had happened, and that the mistakes and everything like that, if I had a series of good questions, first of all, I might learn what actually happened because I didn't have the story, like I didn't completely know, and I could lead them to sort of realize, like, oh my goodness, you're right. I should have called at that point. I should have done this at that point. I should never have told the kid. I would keep it confidential, or any of those mistakes that people make early in their career. And
Hmm.
so I think that my nature is to do that. When I went to work for Exploration, you and I don't meet until 5 years after I'm done with Milton, and I'm no longer
Right.
with Milton. And so and then you're doing this new job. I kind of had that idea. First of all, I liked Milton a lot. I had affection for the place. Second of all, there you were, and I'm thinking, is anyone taking care of her? Like this new job, like who's? So I still have friends who are in the administration there, and I said, I'd be happy to just chat with her and do that. And so they took me up on that offer. And then I realized that through our interaction, I really enjoyed that kind of work. I enjoyed, part of it is that I lucked into kind of early having a few deans that were very mentorable. Like they put themselves in a position where they are open to mentoring, they're open to examining themselves and their motives and all that other kind of stuff. And so it worked. Being with you wasn't hard because asking you a question, you actually had courage and you would try to answer it and then you would work on it. And the next time we spoke, you would think about, I reflected on that. It changed the way I did this. And we had places to go because you were allowing it to affect yourself. And so I'd say that kind of early experiences, like with you and with others, helped me realize that this is important work to do. It makes me grow as a person as I do it, and I think it potentially could make a school better. So I was kind of in.
Absolutely. So thank you for that. And so how do you approach your mentoring relationships? Is there a structure or philosophy that guides how you work with your mentees?
It's interesting. I read kind of a little bit after the fact, like the horse is out of the barn, and then I start reading books about coaching, which is kind of tough. But
It's okay.
because I just started before I realized that people were thinking that this was something that people did.
Right.
So for me, my basic belief is that we teach out of our nature, we teach out of our values. And like Carl Jung would talk about the idea of the shadow, the great analyst Carl Jung would talk about the shadow, that the parts about ourselves we don't know, and how much of the way we live our life comes out of those things. And you don't even know why you decided that or why you reacted in that strong fashion because you haven't been able to look into the shadow areas of life. And that sounds a little bit too much for Deaning, but to a certain degree, when you're put in these really difficult positions of trying to hold together the community that you're hoping will be healthy and kind and taking care of each other, and then there's a breach in that community, and then you find yourself reacting, knowing why you're reacting, the things that tend to trigger you, the behaviors. I used to ask you, I remember all the time, like, what are
Yes.
the things that really get you mad? Like, what
Yeah.
are rational if you watch somebody do, whether it's an adult, a parent, a teacher, a kid, and you had ideas about that. Like, I really dislike it when. And I think examining what that is will let you know, like, oh, wait a minute, I'm about to overreact to this because this is my button and he's pushing it and all that. So part of working with somebody is to, with them, ask clarifying questions about what it is that matters to them, what their values are, where their weak spots are, where are the blind spots, and where are the things that make you lose your rationality and get you into your emotionality. And when to use that, because sometimes coming out of your emotion is exactly the right thing to do, but you just have to make sure you're doing it at the right time. So those kinds of things are the things I want to talk about when I'm working with somebody.
I don't think that people spend enough time thinking about kind of the shadow work, kind of the triggers that you have personally that can affect your work. People don't even realize, ooh, I
Yeah.
should maybe roll that back,
Yeah.
or don't realize that the emotion is coming. And that's something that I have, learned more recently in the work that I'm doing, is that everyone has some of that work that needs to be done. And to be your best self, you have to be vulnerable enough and be able to kind of step into that work and do it and recognize when those emotions are kind of bubbling up, and how to, whether you want to kind of let a little bit of that out, or if you need to kind of take a step back and take a beat, take a breath. We're firing on all cylinders. We're running at 100 miles an hour. We want to do the thing. We want to check the box. And oftentimes we leave a lot of people in our wake because we didn't take the time to kind of do that, or we don't understand enough about ourselves to know kind of what's going to trigger us or what's going to respond. What do you find most rewarding about mentoring others?
I think it's if I'm asking a question of another person, I'm at the same time asking it of myself. Like, there's a built-in mirror there. So as you mentor, you're teaching. As they answer, they're teaching you. Your mentee is teaching you about that. There's some answers you and other people gave me. It's like, oh, excellent point. I hadn't thought of it that way. So it's like that all the time. Like, all the time, people have their own life experiences, and so you're asking questions, but you've only got this limited life that you've led, that I've led.
Right.
And so when someone like you tells me, like, well, I hear what you're saying, but I also see it this way, and I think, oh yeah, that's another good way to see it. How do we act on that? Because that's very true to your own response. So I think what I get out of it is it makes me grow a little bit. Gives me a little bit of perspective on the world of, whether it's boarding or day, but schools are really intense environments. And I lived them every single day from the inside. But I think it's that whole, to use that grandparent thing, I think, again, it's that whole thing about, well, right now, this isn't quite my flesh and blood in the same way it was when I was in there. So I'm
Right.
watching someone. And so there's another part of me that's engaged too, which is that 30,000 foot looking over what it is they're trying to accomplish, the way they're going about doing it, and seeing it a little bit more clearly, because I'm not the one whose adrenaline is flying all the time. I get to be a little bit more removed. And I think thinking about these things without my adrenaline flying is really attractive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I've noticed that for me as well. So, what do you think are the most important qualities of an effective mentor in education?
I think hmm, part of it is that you need to have a point of view, I think. And if you
Okay.
haven't developed a point of view yet, you should sort of, think about it in time. Even make a list, like what matters to me list. Like
Mm,
who am I in this situation? What is this kind of world? What is it that I hope this world does? So that way you even know, like, oh, I'm disappointed working here. Well, that's
mm,
because you've got a whole set of expectations and beliefs and stuff that either you've accessed and you know about, or you haven't yet accessed, but it's acting upon you. And so I think the idea that you have an idea of what it is that what your beliefs are, and then once I think you've got that, you're able to have a point of view that allows you to work with another person. Then you have to invite them to have their point of view, and they might not know what it is yet either. And
mm.
so now I'm feeling a little bit more secure, only a little, but a little bit more
Yeah.
secure about how I feel academic community should live and work. I'm going to ask this other person I'm working with to see what they think about that, and to be able to reach down and figure that out for themselves. And then you move from that, which is kind of the almost the foundational things. And then you have to apply some craft conversations with it.
Mm,
How is it that you can take those beliefs and use the tools of your office? The tools of your office are things like your handbooks, the meetings that you might have with your dorm heads and your class deans or whomever your structure gives you, the
mhm,
way in which you engage with parents, the way in which you speak in front of students, the way that you use the disciplinary code that your school happens to have. All those kinds of things are craft elements that you have to think about as a dean, and then express them with the idea that I'm trying to forward this place towards this goal I have of how it is that we're going to live together, or the goal that we have all expressed together, because it can't be a single goal. And
right.
I think that's moving from self-knowledge to the
Mm,
elements of craft to create the art. And the art is your academic community. Like, that's the final piece. But unless you have to be aware of your craft pieces. You have to think about what your handbook is doing and saying. You have to think about how it is that you're supervising others, and then how you're supervising others to supervise others, because it keeps going like that. If you're
it
talking
does keep
about
going.
your house heads are supervising the people who are living in the house, or they're
Yep.
supervising class deans and the day students, or whatever it is that your structure has. And I think those things really matter. And you have to investigate whether your craft is appropriate. Is it sharp enough? Should I be changing something? All that stuff.
All that stuff matters. So we've talked about kind of all the good things that you should be doing, and how it's important to kind of be in a position to kind of, one, first of all, you got to know yourself, right?
Right.
And do that work so that you can be your best self, and to others, and so that you're setting a good example for other people. But what sort of challenges have you had people push back and say, I know myself, I'm good, I don't need to like explore this with you? What sort of challenges have you encountered in your mentoring relationships? And talk about how you work through those.
Well, some of it is that I think I have worked with people who I don't actually think is suited for the job. I think their
Mm,
personality, their frame of mind, their relationship to confrontation, their ability to withstand the critique that comes from your community if you're in a job like that, this isn't the right work for them.
mm.
And so, and yet they've got it, and they got it.
You're right.
And have to wake up tomorrow and do it again. So I'm not going to look at them and say, I think you're in the wrong job. Although at the same time, I want them to be considering whether there is a place in the world where their talents are more fully expressed and they could be a
Mm.
happier worker, because it is miserable to be in a place where your skills, talent, and nervous system is not really suited towards. And yet people end up in those places all the time.
All the time.
Very sad.
All the
Yeah.
time.
So
Um,
so that to me, like that's a big challenge. Like I look there and I think, oh, not the dean of students, you're a counselor. Like you're somebody who wants to do this work and you're trapped in a dean's persona and in the dean's job description. I think this is really hard. So that kind of thing can be difficult. I have found people who are so talented with kids. So like I would pay $1 million to have that charisma, to have that kind of relationship with children where they just like everybody's waving to them from across the campus. They're doing all this kind of stuff, and I certainly like kids and was liked by some as well. But I watch some of these people and it's like, whoa, that is a beautiful thing you've got coming off of you. And so that part of the job, which matters, is they've got down. But then that idea that they would take that very same child who waved at them earlier, sit them in front and hold them accountable for something they did that was harmful to the community, rips them to shreds. And it's
yeah.
very hard to get them to that place where they can go from this, I love their affection, I love giving them my love and affection, and now I have to hold them accountable. I think if you have the right mindset, you're holding them accountable out of exactly the same energy. Love,
Exactly.
all that kind of stuff. And that's how you're doing that work. But for some I have worked with, that was a very difficult a leap to make.
Leap to make.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that rapport is certainly important, and you want that rapport, and that rapport also helps when you have to, like you said, sit someone down. I wouldn't say take them to task, but sit someone down and hold them accountable for their actions, right? And so, building on that relationship, not being kind of shy about or afraid of, because that relationship that you can't have that conversation. It should be the exact opposite, but some people don't really feel that way, and it's a shame because that's for me, relationships are so important, and the fabric of what holds the community together. And so, if you're not building those relationships, not nurturing those relationships, how are you going to restore those relationships, right?
right.
If there's an issue, and
Well,
so,
yep.
um, what do you, in the dean's role in particular? Why do you think mentorship is so valuable in that particular role?
I think part of it is that it's humbling. It's humbling to be someone accepting coaching, teaching, mentorship. And I think you want to be humbled in the right way. Like the community wants to humble you almost every day, right?
Every day.
Parents and students and staff are all going to have a critique of the work you're trying to do. And that's a certain kind of exterior work that's trying to say, well, I'm not in total agreement with how you're running this place or what you're thinking and stuff like that. So there's that, but there's another kind of humbleness which just simply says, I can't possibly know everything I need to know about doing this kind of work. This work is too complex. So
Mm,
what I'm going to do is I'm going to let myself go through a process with another human being and let myself, you know, be lower, like be someone who's actually at that place where I'm taking in. I might argue with my mentor. That's great. Good mentor arguments are good. I like them.
yeah.
And I think all that, but it's accepting the idea that I am not fully formed, and this person is here to help me discover what that form could be in the future. And I think that is a good place to park our ego and a good place to park our spirit, actually.
Yeah, because and that relationship, you don't have to have all the answers. And I feel like when we get into these roles or these positions, whether it's dean or any other leadership position, you are you are supposed to have all the answers, right? And it
Right.
sometimes people feel like it's a knock on their leadership or their ability to lead when they don't have the answer. And that was something that I had to kind of check at the door myself. It's like, no, I don't know. I'm happy to try and find the no, but I don't know right now, and that's okay for me not to know. And it's okay for me to make a mistake also because I'm a human being. But we get in these roles and we feel like, oh, well, I'm the dean or she's the dean or he's the dean, and they have this kind of view of who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to operate,
Right.
and sometimes it's not human.
I remember
um,
listening to one of the actors who played Batman. Said the thing you have to watch for is the suit starts acting like you're wearing it, but the suit starts acting. I think that's true of our role as a dean. Like I'm a person and I'm an educator, but my role starts doing things, and I start doing things out of my role rather than doing it out of myself. And sometimes you do things out of your role because you're being paid that money to accept responsibility for some part of the job, and you have to belly up to the bar and do what you're supposed to do. But in other parts, it's like not getting too caught up in the title. And you say, like one of the more liberating things that it took me a few years was to be able to say, as you just said, I don't know. I don't know the best thing to do here. Let me think about it. Let me talk to a few other people. I'm going to get back to you, Mrs. Smith, about what I think the right path for your boy is right now, or something like that, where I could just say, I know part of it is the role of dean, or the title of dean, made me think I was supposed to just answer.
Know everything and answer the question on the spot, in the moment, right now. Let's do it, right?
Exactly.
That's not always the case, and should not always be the case. Not only with kind of deaning, but kind of in life in general. Sometimes we just need to take a pause, right? Like we don't have to do the thing right now all the time. I want to go back to one thing you said, David, about being wired for this job, because I think a lot of times, or sometimes, people fall into these roles because they're well liked on campus. They feel like, kind of the external view is that you have a great relationship with kids. So now, why don't you be the dean?
Right.
And that is not. That's, you look at it, it's one piece of the puzzle, but there's so many other pieces that go into being a good dean. Can you talk about what you think those pieces are?
I think some of it is that you're able to move from being with your students and their parents and the staff to somehow being able to look down on the community. Like it's the idea that you can have perspective, and that the perspective is a higher one, meaning that you're seeing how the whole thing's fitting together rather than feeling the drama and tension and all the stuff you feel by walking through everybody all the time. And I think some people are naturally inclined to reach towards a broader perspective, to sort of see, like, when you use words like "for the most part," or like, those are good words. Like I like the idea when you use words that are basically saying more or less, for the most part, like it's pretty good in general. Like those kind of phrases are helpful, I think, for a person to be able to have, because if you're only dealing with the specifics of your school and your situations, you won't see where the whole thing's aiming anymore. You will start losing that. So I think that the notion of having a higher perspective is a good quality to possess. I think the idea that justice matters to you, that people are treated fairly, that you are annoyed or worse when you watch people be treated in an unfair fashion. I worked at a school one time where I thought the way that the boys were treating the girls in that school was just, it was different than the school I had been before. It was way more boy run, and I did not like the relationships between the genders, and that became something like, I want to be able to feel what I'm feeling and be annoyed by stuff, because I want to be able to realize that I don't want to live that way, and I don't want to have our community live that way. So I think the idea that you allow yourself to feel what matters and that you respond to it matters too. And I think you can make good use of that. I think the idea that you can, that you have some kind of, you keep going back to something that is a touchstone. And if you're a religious person, it could be your holy book or something like that. I think in any kind of a school that you have to take your handbook seriously, and that you have to actually, and that you're willing to sort of work that thing as a living document. Get rid of this rule if you never enforce it. Change this rule to be a little bit more flexible, or this needs to be stricter because kids are getting hurt or something. But use that document with students on your handbook committee, with other kinds of people, so that you can form the basis, all have a mutual touchstone and reference point about what this is. Some people see, I think they see things like that as sort of a guidepost that we don't really need to pay attention to. I have a natural inclination to want to have this sort of shared touchstone, and that's a part of my personality. And I think it can be useful if it's part of a dean's personality to realize that we're going to find a way to express this, and we're going to do it in our school documents, and we're going to make it a living thing that changes as we change. So I
Yeah.
think that kind of a thing matters too. Thick skin or detachment, I think, is essential. And by detachment, I feel like non-attachment, almost the way a Buddhist would talk about that. The idea that
Mm.
I am not tied to this coming out in a certain way. This
Yeah.
situation is heavy, it's thick, people are upset. We need to do something. And I can't just act as if there's only one outcome and be so attached to that outcome that I sort of blow by all the other realities so that I make the outcome I want come out. I have to be kind of unattached enough that I can do the good, just things that help this situation heal itself and have the students and parents be healed as we pursue it. But it might not be the one I initially think it should be. I have to sort of
Mm.
realize that, oh, that's also a good outcome. It just isn't the one I naturally incline to. And that thing, not being attached to student anger, not being attached to parents' anger, not being attached, like if I allow other people to manipulate me through their disappointment, then I will not be effective. And so I can't just allow myself to get blown away because someone didn't think I did it right. I have to use other kinds of touchstones to find that out. So that thick-skinned detachment thing, I think, is also important.
It is. That piece is easier said than done
Yeah,
sometimes, though.
yeah,
And I think
exactly.
that's kind of a great segue into my next question. And with experienced deans who haven't taken on haven't had a mentorship in their lives, like why do you think well, maybe let me back up and say, do you think that someone can use a mentor at any stage of their kind of deaning career?
Or any career. I have a good friend who runs a school, recently retired, and took a coach on in his 60th year of life. 10
Yeah.
years or so into his headship, and just realized that I need this. I need this now. So this is a very late career person saying, I need this now. So I think people, in their early career need it in some ways to start that investigation. But I think the whole notions of craft and the whole art you're trying to create and the whole notion of how the times have changed and I'm not necessarily changing with them. And I need
Mm.
someone to help me think about that so I'm not the person I was 20 years ago trying to live now. I think coaching to sort of allow yourself to change with the way that the world is changing is really important. So I would say late career people in some ways need it more because they can more easily fall into a world that's fossilized.
Mm.
I can do that pretty easily. Like you just see the world as it was when you were 40 or 30 or 20, and the world isn't that way when you're in your 50s or 60s. So I would say like all the more welcome. It's just that you work on different things at different stages. And I think that
Yeah.
that's the important part.
That is fair. And so let's talk a little bit. I want to go back down memory lane and kind of talk about the times when we were deans, because neither one of us are deans anymore.
Right.
What do you think how has the landscape changed in your mind for deans?
Um, I think that well, some of it is that the word accountable. That
Mm.
when I used to talk about supervision to my staff, to the house heads, to student leaders, to everyone, that I always say there's two parts to this. When we're supervising somebody, we are supporting them. We're allowing them to do
Mm.
their job. We're giving them, either material goods, or we're giving them our time, or we're giving them guidance, or we're doing these kinds of things to support them. And then we're checking in to make certain they're doing the job they're supposed to do. We hold them
Hmm.
accountable to what the work is. And those
Yeah.
two things together are supervision. And I think now that second part, the holding accountable, making certain that people do what it is they said they were supposed to do, or what the school needs from them, or whatever else, is held in a different way right now. And I think that all of us want to express our job in the support component of it, which
Ah.
like that's really fun.
Right.
Like you help
Yeah.
people out, they tell you you're really nice, they pet you on the head, you get really all these feelings. Who wouldn't want that all the time? But the reality is you can't have a healthy department, a healthy school, if you're not willing to do the other part. And I think people are less willing to do the other part now than it was when I was coming up. And I see that over
Yeah.
and over again. People who want this job only want to do the supporting part of it, not the holding accountable, checking in, making certain this job's getting done part. That would
Well,
be
that's the That's the tough skin. That's the thick skin. That's your kind of constitution, for lack of a better term, that you
Right.
talked about a little bit earlier. Being able to have those hard conversations, whether or not it's with, a colleague that's your friend, whether or not it's someone who is a part of your leadership team, whether it's a student that you really like, whether it's a parent that's yelling at you in surround sound,
Right.
like
Right.
those are the moments when you do have to kind of stand on your values, know your triggers, and done your shadow work to be able to kind of weather that storm. But that's the beauty of this work, in my opinion.
That's right.
That's where, in those hard times, that's when good lessons are learned. That's when we learn, that's when we can do better. That's when we can be good examples to others on how to kind of govern yourself in these situations so that when others have those same types of things, they look to you as someone kind of not necessarily a blueprint, but as a model of
Right.
the behavior, and people rather not.
That's so that
Uh,
rather not to a certain degree. And then there are, of course, brave souls who do it regardless, because that's just
yeah,
how they're
that's
made.
just who they are.
And that's who they are, exactly. And so that change is fundamental. And of course, we're looking at everybody's looking at how students were teachers, and even when students drank a six pack the night before, or treated this other person like a bully, or did something else, that whole notion that we want them to take ownership of it, to do their apologies, and then this whole restorative justice thing, this whole thing like I need to make my community better. I've injured it, and now I need to make it better. Is something that
Yes,
I don't think we emphasize as much back in my day, and I like that we're emphasizing that now. I like the idea that we should be really thoughtful about how it is that somebody um, contributes to repairing the relationship, the community, whatever it is that was harmed by their actions. So that's an evolution I think is positive. And I want to make certain it doesn't to get rid of the accountability part. I think, the idea of
absolutely not.
consequences for my actions is one of the things you're trying to teach an adolescent. It's really important. But I also think we may have swung that a little too far, where it was all consequence based and not as much of that restored my community responsibility that I think now we do better.
We do better, and that's something that I wish I had a little bit more, or a little some more tools in my tool belt
Mhm.
back when I was a dean, because I do see the value in one holding students accountable. We've got to set the standard, right?
Right.
But at the same time, understanding and having conversation and building relationships so that when kids have a decision to make, there's much more at stake.
Right.
There's not a lot at stake when you don't feel a connection, when there's not a connection to the community, there's not a connection to the thing that you're doing, only the thing that kind of selfishly, kids are like, oh, this feels good at the time, or I'm happy to do this, or, is exciting, but not a connection to the greater community at large. And I think that restorative piece is what brings it back to the community, or the person in particular that you're affecting, is so important. And I want, and when I talk to people about restorative practices, and people kind of roll their eyes, I'm like, yeah, you just want to kind of get out of consequences. And that's an easy lane for people to slide into,
Right.
especially those folks who just want to do the supportive thing.
That's right.
That's a
That's right.
wonderful place for them to go
Right.
if they don't want to kind of do the hard consequence thing. It's not a either or, it's a both and,
It's a both way.
in my opinion.
And I think it is an easy thing to slip into, or if you are avoidant of having to do the hard thing. So for sure, you can misuse this whole restorative practices thing. But if you use it right, if you think about what the craft elements are of having that work, I think it has such potential to turn things around right in the heart and the value system of our kids. So.
Absolutely. So, do you think we can get people to do the hard thing? Is that something that's trainable? Like, how do you move from, like, outside of being wired that way? Like, how do you move people from being conflict averse, for lack of a better term, in these roles to a place where they can handle and manage with not feeling like it takes too much toll on who they are?
My last 20 years of my work life was spent at this program that would predominantly hire college folks as teachers, and then early career people as administrators. So the
Mm,
administrators might be mid to late 20s or early 30s, and they would
hmm.
be supervising all the college students who were teachers. They would be making all the parent phone calls. They were doing all that kind of stuff. So they're early in their career. They don't know whether they're suited for this or not. You got to try things to find out
Right.
if you're suited to it. And part of what I learned trying to support them and part of is to be able to use the rhetoric of um, your responsibility, to use that idea that you have responsibility towards certain things, and that all together we have responsibility for this learning community. And in order for this learning community to be able to be healthy and strong, I'm going to have to give up something. And
Mm.
and part of what I'm going to have to give up are things like people's affection. Some
Yeah. Yes.
people's affection. And sometimes I'm going to lose some sleep, and sometimes I'm going to. And the idea that you normalize that with people, like not think like, oh my God, everyone hates me, I can't stand it.
Yeah.
Where no, everyone doesn't hate you. Yes, you can stand this. This is normal for this kind of work, and to make people's nervous systems sort of find a settling place where you get hit by that. Your adrenaline does want to escape. You do start feeling those kind of, why am I doing this work? Or I want to shrink or hide from it. And you support them while they do it. You talk them through it. Through mentorship, you get people to realize that, okay, that difficult conversation, which felt miserable while I was in the middle of it, actually they came back 3 days later and they realized that, oh, that was so helpful to me. I'm so glad you did that for me. Like, you're going to have as many wins as you will have losses. And even some of your wins won't even be visible to you. You won't
Yeah.
know that you actually changed the way kids looked at life because you were willing to hold that line or have that conversation. They might not even know for a year or two. But if you continue to do the good work, good things happen out of it. You have to have faith in it. So I think being able to work with early career people who are thinking about doing this kind of work, Dean's work, it's important that you recognize that this is something that will affect your nervous system and your spirit. That there are ways of looking at it that makes you affect it less negatively and actually affect it more positively. That you accept with a lack. You don't get attached to the idea that you're heroic or that you're always going to be right or something like that. You accept the idea that you are one flawed piece in the middle of a flawed community, and you're going to do your best, because doing your best is all we got.
It's all you can do.
Yeah. And
No, I love that.
I think you can. And I think a number of people who I think without that kind of support would have floundered or beat themselves out were able to steel themselves, go out there and do that good work. I think it's possible.
Awesome. Awesome. So, what do you hope your legacy as a mentor will be for other educational leaders?
If I had any legacy, small L, for working with other people, it would be simply that it sets up an expectation that they owe somebody else that too.
Mm.
That if I work with you, and literally this is what you do now. I mean, this whole deep roundtable, like that literally turned into something that now you do for others, and that you're trying to make certain that these questions are asked, these examinations happen. And to me, the idea that and someone did it to me. Like, I didn't make this up. Like, somebody took care of me at some other point in my professional career, which allowed me to go ahead and do it. So I'd say the legacy is simply that we get into a place where we take care of people, we take care of them, where those who might know a little bit more engage with people who need to know a little bit more, and then they in turn will do the same for somebody else later.
Mm.
That to me is perfect. Like, that's enough. That would be great.
Awesome. So, any deans listening today, what sort of takeaways would you give for them in this moment?
Um, Well, oddly enough, I'm switching gears entirely. Like, make sure
It's
you
okay.
live your life. Like, make sure you
Yeah.
do
Yes.
what matters to you. I used to ask you every single time, did you exercise this week? Did
You did ask me that, which was much appreciated.
you lifting weights? You were doing your workouts. You were a runner. You were doing all these things, and I wanted to make sure you did it because it mattered to your life. Besides all the endorphins that are released just by doing stuff, it also is your sense of self. For me, when I was a dean, I loved music to a certain ridiculous passion. And the idea that I would play music, I would go to concerts, I would do things like that is part of what kept me sane, that I kept my reading, that I went out with friends, that I did stuff like that. The job invites you to live on an island, and you
Yep.
need to get all the little ferry boats up and that you keep from your island. You cannot just stay there. You have to go ashore. You've got to go live your life. And when you live your life, this work, which seems all encompassing, will find its proper level in your life, which is that it's important, but it's not everything. So that would be the thing I would offer everybody.
Awesome. I love that. And so, David, I am so happy we reconnected and we're able to have this conversation today. And also want to let folks know that David's going to be at the Dean's Roundtable Annual Conference this summer, which will be held the last week in June, the 23rd through the 26th on the campus of New England Innovation Academy. We have an exceptional lineup of speakers, David included. I can't tell you how much of an inspiration you've been to me in my life. So I want to say that publicly to everyone. You've taught me a lot of what I know about doing this work. And I know that if our paths hadn't crossed, my work as a dean would have been very different. So thank you. And so thanks everyone for listening today. And as always, thanks for spending time with us on the Dean's Roundtable podcast.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Dean's Roundtable podcast series. For those of you leading the charge in student life, if you're ready to rediscover what made you fall in love with this work in the first place, join us at the Dean's Roundtable Annual Conference. During these 4 transformative days, you'll connect with fellow deans, share game-changing ideas, and walk away with practical strategies you can use right now. Head to deansroundtable.org to learn more, and if you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Today's episode was hosted by Bridget Johnson in conversation with David Torcoletti, produced and edited by Andrick Sigmund, and music by PremiumBeat.com. For any questions, contact information can be found in the episode description. And, as always, thanks again for listening.